It often happens that the husband, who is also the father, leaves the family. But there are plenty of exceptions. Ignatius was just such an exception. He raised his daughter alone and named her Faith, putting all his belief into that name that his daughter would be happy. Ignatius himself wasn't happy by conventional standards. From birth, he was deaf and mute, living with his mom and grandma in a remote village. Ignatius wasn't even 18 yet when he was left alone. His grandma and mom went to the city to the market, taking the eggs and sour cream they had painstakingly collected. They made such trips several times a month, and whatever they managed to sell helped them get by. But this time, the old bus got stuck on the railroad crossing due to the driver's fault, and the express train couldn't stop. The driver and passengers in the front seats died instantly. The rest were taken away by 3 ambulances. Among those who died were Ignatius's mom and grandma, so the boy was left alone. He received a pension as a disabled child, but it was small, so Ignatius looked for work in the gardens of fellow villagers. Sometimes he found it, sometimes not. But Ignatius never went around the village begging. He survived on his own. In the village, they pitied him, especially the older women. They knew Ignatius would refuse treats, so they came up with excuses like, "These are memorial pies." And these women had plenty to mourn. Almost all were widows. Ignatius's peers had either gone to the city or gotten married here and had kids. Ignatius didn't think about marriage. He understood no one would go for him. But suddenly, one appeared, a bit older than Ignatius. She came to the village by chance, escaping from a drunken crowd she had once gotten mixed up in. And it ended badly. Half of that group went to prison for robbery, and she was lucky not to go with them that time. But she knew next time they'd force her along, so she came to the village, far from her past. The first person she met was Ignatius. He was returning from the store where he went once a week for bread. This city girl asked him if anyone rented out a room. He barely understood the question and couldn't answer in a way she'd understand. But Irene quickly figured it out. If this deaf-mute lives alone, it seemed very likely, then there'd be space for her too, without money for rent. It was easy to win over Ignatius. He didn't put up a defense. He fell in love head over heels. He'd never loved anyone, knowing he was disabled. And here a girl was showing him attention. Now Ignatius worked and earned wherever he could. Well, as they lived together, she needed clothes. She'd fled in what she was wearing. Plus, soon they learned there'd be a child. Irene didn't want the child. She kept trying to go to the hospital. Ignatius begged her to let it be. A girl was born, but the next evening, Irene fled from the maternity ward. Later, Irene found out she had emptied the candy box where they kept money for the child's needs. Ignatius picked up his daughter from the maternity ward. They didn't want to give her to him, but thanks to the former village council chairman who persuaded them, though he himself doubted how Ignatius would manage. But as soon as he held the baby close, he didn't let go until they got home, peering into her little face and seeing she looked like both his grandma and his mom. Ignatius wasn't afraid it would be hard. He was afraid his daughter wouldn't hear or speak. But Faith wasn't deaf-mute. She just started talking later than other kids. After all, Ignatius couldn't talk to her, only with gestures. In kindergarten, Faith learned to speak and even sang very well with the others. While Faith was very little, Ignatius slept on the floor next to her crib. He couldn't hear if his daughter was crying, so he'd wake up several times and check if everything was okay with her. Ignatius could quietly make some sounds, and Faith thought for a long time that was normal. She repeated them herself until she realized her dad couldn't hear her. He only saw. So he watched Faith constantly, and then she wasn't scared. One day, she was playing outside near their gate and heard a kitten meowing in the bushes. She approached and took it in her arms. Faith stroked its soft, fluffy fur, asking what the kitten's name was and where it came from. Faith was so happy that she started shouting to her dad about the find, but she knew he couldn't hear her. But suddenly, her dad jumped over the fence, ran to Faith with the kitten in her arms. He got scared for his daughter, thinking she was in danger. He grabbed his daughter and the kitten and carried them into the house. He rocked them like that to calm them, and the kitten stayed to live with them. He saw Faith off to school and knew when to hiss and spit at her bullies. Faith had plenty of bullies. For several years, they called her the deaf-mute's daughter, often mocking her when they saw her dad. Faith didn't know then that kids can be cruel just like that.
She thought it was only her, that she was a laughingstock. As best she could, she explained to her dad why she came home from school in tears. What could he say? He hugged her daughter, stroked her head, tried to show with his fingers how much he loved her. Faith so wanted to understand what her dad was saying. Maybe he could teach her not sign language, but how to fight back. She was so tired of always retreating, as if, like her father, she didn't hear the insults aimed at her or her dad. So Faith lived withdrawn, trusting no one but Ignatius. And at some point, resentment washed over Faith. But why was all this happening to her? She knew nothing about her mom at all. And the older Faith got, the more she was ashamed of her father, and he felt it. Now he didn't walk next to his daughter, not to school, not to the store, always kept a distance. The now-grown cat, Purr, was always nearby. And then Faith stopped holding back. She yelled at her father, could flip over the pot of potatoes he had cooked for dinner, and go to her room without supper, slamming the door. Her father couldn't hear Faith slamming the door, but he saw well how his daughter got up from the table and kicked the stool. How many times Ignatius wanted to talk to Faith? He saw perfectly that his daughter was bad off, that she had no friends. But how to talk about it with her? When she was little, he could tell her about the kolobok with gestures. She didn't understand everything. But now, Ignatius couldn't explain to his daughter, and at 15, Faith didn't listen to him.
Explanations anymore. She got a group from another village, a group where they didn't think about the future, living from day to evening. That's the freedom of idleness Faith tasted, and now at school they tried not to bother her. No, Faith didn't get into fights, but a certain hardness appeared in her gaze. Her walk changed, she walked with a swagger, hands in pockets. She still didn't engage in verbal fights because she didn't know what to say, but she could quietly throw out something like, "My head hurts from you." The teachers noticed the change in Faith too. She became defiant, though she didn't always respond to remarks, but did even worse, listened while turned away or could just turn and leave. So when Faith took her documents after 9th grade, the teachers didn't try to dissuade her. They asked what she planned to do next, and Faith indifferently replied, "Something. I'll do something here, don't worry." She didn't explain anything to her father. With her bag already packed, she gestured that she was leaving for good. Faith saw her father's confusion and knew that if it were up to him, he wouldn't let his daughter go. But resentment toward her father had already captured Faith, and she didn't want to sort out if she was right or not. Faith remembered her childhood. Okay, she was dressed worse than everyone. Okay, her father never read her a fairy tale aloud. At parent-teacher meetings, he sat in the back row, staring at the class leader's lips to understand at least something. And Faith had asked so many times not to go to school, but her father went anyway. But now her father wouldn't follow her, wouldn't embarrass her. She'd leave and that was it. And Ignatius felt all this. He wasn't needed by Faith. His daughter was ashamed of him. But how could he not be ashamed? Ignatius would pray for Faith as best he could. He just needed to hide an envelope with money in her bag. She hadn't asked for a penny. Her father was so unnecessary to her that she wouldn't take money. In the city, Faith looked for vocational schools that provided dorms. She settled on one that taught sewing professions. And good thing she went straight from the station. There were only 3 spots left, but they took Faith, housed her in a dorm not far from the school. The first year, Faith tried to study, got a stipend, somehow managed to economize and fit into that more than modest sum. She knew later she could look for work. If lucky, it'd be good to get into an atelier, decent salary there, only she'd need an apartment. Even the simplest, but it would cost more than the dorm. Faith calculated and figured, and then resentment flared up in her again. But why had she never seen her mother? Her father, though he didn't abandon her, didn't put her in an orphanage, so maybe he should have. Maybe her adoptive parents would have been rich, and she wouldn't be studying in a trade school, but going to university after school. The daughters of rich parents, and Faith had been told this, go to study in Europe, and know for sure they'll get in. Money can do anything. And she saves for months for stockings. From the next room, she had to climb out on her own.
She wouldn't even remember her father. He writes her almost every day in messages, and she either ignores or sends short, monotonous excuses. And then Faith snapped. She found a group where everything was allowed. She held on for a while longer, but as one girl who dated the main guy in that group told her, if you want to stay clean, go find another group. But no, Faith wasn't the most fashionable in that group, but she found side work. Whatever she earned, she left at secondhand stores. Faith discovered these shops where you could find quite decent clothes. She didn't finish the vocational school. She met a young man. He wasn't from their group, courted her beautifully and persistently, but not for long. After 3 months, he proposed to Faith. That same evening, Faith wrote to her father that she was getting married. Just 2 sentences, but no invitation to the wedding and no date. Ignatius, reading the message, couldn't hold back. He cried, and good thing it was already dark. Though he sat on the porch, no one could see his tears. Faith tried to hide her tears for a long time too, from her mother-in-law and father-in-law, from her husband, Sergio, and from the few girlfriends she had. Faith wouldn't show her tears for anything. Faith cried because in her husband's house, they openly despised her. They called her by a nickname like Little Duck instead of her name. Sergio defended Faith at first, then got tired. Once Faith tried to complain, but her husband said, "I don't understand. You live in our apartment, don't work, so at least help my mom. My mom, by the way, still works." Faith wanted to say she cleaned all day, did housework, washed and ironed every day, cooked, but she was shy. And her mother-in-law didn't choose her words. She called Faith the worst names. Faith already understood they wanted a different daughter-in-law here. So why did they have the wedding? They invited their guests, but told her right away not to bring any villagers near. Faith herself didn't want to invite her father. She was still angry at him. But at least for decency, they asked about him. Not even a month passed before her mother-in-law started talking about how unequal their marriage was, recalling how Faith couldn't understand what a fish fork was, a salad fork, a teaspoon versus a dessert spoon, how to use a table knife. They eat cutlets with it, and it doesn't more remarks. Faith tried to learn them all, but it wasn't working yet. "In your backwoods, they don't know about this," she'd hear. "Sergio, I don't know how she'll sit at the same table with decent people." Then Faith held back, didn't cry, but felt like in elementary school when there wasn't a day without teasing her and her father. And again, her father came out as the guilty one, and Faith wrote him a message. Never had it been so long. And here, Faith poured out everything. That while living with her father, she had no normal clothes or shoes. She remembered how only once her father bought her a cake when she started first grade. Of course, she'd never seen a fish fork, and the same for other city things. She wrote that now, in her husband's house, she was a nobody, a cleaner, service staff. She still ate with everyone at the same table, but if she took the wrong utensil, she'd usually leave without finishing dinner.
Yell at Faith himself that she handed him the wrong shirt or didn't clean his shoes. The letter turned out long. Faith wrote haphazardly, but still about how it was all his fault, her father's. Her father replied that Faith should leave. She always had a home, and as long as he was alive, he'd protect and help his daughter. And that angered Faith even more. She reproached her father for having no idea how expensive life was in the city. But here at least she could find work, and what work was there for her in their village. Faith suffered for almost a year. The duties of a servant were firmly fixed to her. Now no one remembered that Faith didn't sit at the common table. Instead, they loudly discussed this or that girl her mother-in-law had picked for her son and insistently photographed. And how it all would have ended was clear. They'd kick Faith out of this house without asking where she'd go. But then a letter came from a neighbor. She wrote that Faith's father was dying. They weren't even keeping him in the hospital anymore, brought him home. And only now did Faith feel who she was losing, the only person who always needed her. She was rude to him, blamed him for everything, and all this time she never came home. And when things got really bad, when she fell into complete dependence on her husband's family, only then did she write how it was for her. Her father asked her to drop everything and come home. Well, Faith replied that there was nothing for her in the village, and if he loved her, he'd have provided her a different life. So let him not call her. She had no one, and let it be as it is. But then it was like someone shook Faith. She remembered that in her old coat she'd once hidden a little money. She grabbed the coat, slammed the apartment door, and went to the bus station. She rode thinking at least the money was enough for a ticket, and it was. By evening, Faith entered her childhood home. Her father lay on the bed, his face blended with the pillow, not a drop of color. His eyes were closed, but as soon as he sensed Faith entered, her father felt it. He opened his eyes, and in them such joy, such love. No one had ever looked at Faith like that, only her dad. She threw plates, scattered things, ran away from him so he wouldn't walk next to her, and he kept his distance all his life, to be nearby in any moment if Faith was in danger. Or how her dad at the crack of dawn fried her favorite potatoes, then wrapped the pan and covered it with a pillow so the potatoes wouldn't cool, and how he followed her, trying to stay unnoticed, when she hurried late evening to the neighboring village to her new group, where they smoked and drank, first wine, then stronger drinks. And the first time from that stronger stuff, Faith felt so bad she crawled out of the bar and sat right on the ground in a cold puddle. And her dad was there then too, took Faith in his arms and carried her several kilometers, rocking her like a little one. And now he points with his hand to the nightstand, wants Faith to open it. Faith opens it. There's a homemade box. Her dad made it himself. And in the box, money. A decent sum in currency. Her dad saved this money for her, for Faith. That means he spent almost nothing on himself. Faith takes his hand and kisses it, whispering for the first time, "I love you, Dad." He doesn't hear. He feels, understands by her lips what his daughter is saying, and closes his eyes. And down his sunken cheeks, tears roll. Her father left quietly at dawn, and his face was bright, happy. Faith had seen such a face on her dad when she was little, yes. Because then her dad was her whole world. Later she started being ashamed of him, resenting that he wasn't like everyone else, started being rude and insolent, left for several years without visiting, barely answered.
Calls, messages, then got married thinking everything would be different for her now. But very soon she understood her husband's family didn't accept her. And then her husband stopped accepting her too. Her father, meanwhile, was too shy to write that he wouldn't let anyone offend Faith. She didn't want to read that between the lines. After the cemetery, Faith sat until morning over 3 common notebooks. These were her father's letters. He wrote to Faith knowing he wouldn't dare send them as phone messages because he wasn't sure she'd read them. From her birth, her father recorded everything he wanted to say to his daughter, but couldn't. All thoughts and feelings, how he rejoiced when Faith took her first step, how he grieved when she left home, how bitter and hurtful it was that she didn't invite him to the wedding. She reread several times about why her name was Faith. Her father never doubted his daughter would have a good life. He believed in it even when Faith deliberately was rude and offended him. More than anything, her father didn't want her to suffer, and at the end, he wrote that she was the most important and significant person in his life. She deserved the best, and no one had the right to offend her. She should value herself and live happily. Reading his diary, Faith imagined hearing her father's voice. Probably if he could speak, that's what it would sound like. And he was afraid to show his daughter his writings. Afraid Faith would mock him, and wrote in hope that someday his daughter would read it and not blame him for the words. And such a time came. Faith lost the closest and dearest person, but what strength his love had that he remained with Faith. He'd always be with her. In the morning, Faith goes to the city, collects her things, and waits until her mother-in-law and husband return home. Without answering their questions about where she was and where she was going again, she says she's divorcing, and doesn't wait for whatever Barb, her mother-in-law, will say now. She silently leaves the apartment to never cross its threshold again. She no longer wants to waste a second on people who don't value her. Now someone stands up for her. She has her father, and even though he's passed away, her father instilled in her strength and self-love. It's been a month since Faith lives in her parental home. A hard month because for the first time, Faith recalls her whole life and doesn't pity herself or blame her father. And when it seems to her there's no worse person than herself, her hand reaches for her father's diaries. And there, Faith is completely different, a beloved daughter whose life is just beginning. Her father is always nearby in these diaries. He never doubts for a minute that everything will work out for Faith. And Faith starts a new life. She gets a job in the settlement at one of the sewing workshops just nearby. A whole shop opened. They took her on probation. Faith didn't have documents that she studied at vocational school, but Faith knew how to sew, and soon she had clients. There was little time, work at the sewing workshop during the day, then home. Faith kept order in the house and yard. It became a habit for her to consult with her dad about what flowers to plant in the flower bed, and then always refresh the bouquet near her father's portrait. Faith didn't notice that now in the village they treated her differently. Former classmates often asked Faith to sew them something new, and always praised her for the dresses turning out beautiful, and Faith sewed quickly. About this, Faith also told
father and was sure he heard her as he never had, and rejoiced. And one evening, as Faith was going to bed, she asked her father, "Dad, do you think I'll manage to study further? Will you help me?" Probably no one would believe that Faith heard his answer, but she said it with her own lips. Yes, Faith, you'll manage. Study. I'm with you. 3 years later, with a designer's diploma, Faith moved to work at the largest atelier in the district center. There was even less time, but now Faith was known not only in the district center. City ladies ordered dresses from her too, and one of them suggested Faith open her own atelier, helped with renting premises and equipment, lent money for registration as a private enterprise, without any interest, out of pure human respect for her work results. Faith was afraid to borrow. About this, she consulted with her dad too, and it seemed to her he said, "Don't be afraid, Faith. You'll manage. This is your life, and you have the right to choose." And Faith really managed, and her father helped. Yes, she lost him, but she gained good memories of him and found herself in this world. The strength of her father's love had no boundaries, and that love was with her all her life, brought Faith confidence in herself. Faith now knew her father loved and cared for her both in his lifetime and after, when he was gone. More precisely, he continued to love his daughter, which Faith could read any time in his diaries. And Faith knew for sure that not everyone was so lucky with love and care from the dearest person. And though Faith had a whole life ahead, no one would dare humiliate her anymore. Her dad wouldn't allow it. He taught her that too. He'd be nearby in her memory and heart.